Chapter 66. On his fourth night in the intake dorms, Alden's eyes snapped open at 3 a.m. He barely resisted the urge to scream and throw his comfortable pillow across the room like an angry child. He was tired, but not tired enough to ignore it anymore. He was beginning to see that this was going to be a chronic problem, not something that he could just shake off. He felt almost as bad as he had the first day. Only now his brain was slightly less busy with the 10,000 things it had been juggling since he came back home. And it had enough bandwidth to dig at the one thing he was desperately trying to ignore. He reached up to touch the aureate around his neck. He couldn't use it right now. He couldn't even bring himself to try, in the same way he couldn't bring himself to press his hand against a hot stove without some dire need driving him. But he still liked the thing so much. "I think it's a little alien of me," he said to the ceiling. He pulled up the system page that showed his leave. He had around 8 months completely off. 6 for mental health time. 2 for other reasons. It really said that, other reasons. The therapist had asked Alden about it, and he told her he had no idea. She'd shrugged it off as some serotonin oddity. Alden guessed it was. Needing recovery time from getting an upgrade wasn't going to make sense to another human. He was hoping for a steady improvement over the course of the 2-month time frame, and not the same low-level existential torture for the whole period followed by a sudden moment of acceptance. Hey! Maybe acceptance was the key. "I accept you," he said dramatically to his own bound power. "I accept you in all your mutilated glory. We can do really cool shit together. Probably. If we could just calm down and stop feeling so confined and rearranged and upset about it, maybe we could focus on the positives." It didn't help. Whatever. He had like a billion messages to answer anyway. He propped himself up on his pillows and set the television to stream global music videos. He ran through emails and voicemails one after the other, trying to figure out how to arrange his contact priorities with the system in exactly the right way so that he got all the important stuff and everything else got dumped into the deal with it eventually file. Connie, Bo, Jeremy, and Kibby were his high-priority personals. Clijou, too, since she'd asked. He sent her a message thanking her for whatever she'd done to smooth out his return. The security people being pre-informed that he was coming in did seem to have helped a little, and getting to spend a day and a half with Connie without figuring out the paperwork himself first was great. She'd also sent him an unexpected email about the Manon situation. Apparently Jeremy and Bo had told her about that in case the other rabbit had done something to him and was the reason he was missing. She explained that she hadn't had anyone look into Manon because it wasn't something that could be done legally unless Alden officially told the Anisetter and authorities himself that he'd seen or felt her using some form of mind control. She also indicated that while many people might believe him, he would have to provide convincing proof of some kind for actual action to be taken. "People are panicky about sways," she wrote. "So they'll take you seriously. But at the same time, people are panicky about sways, so someone basically has to commit the crime in full view of the public before the authorities can legally force them to undergo survey by a reader type." She added that she really didn't advise him to have his own mind read in an attempt to provide proof of a subtle event that had happened half a year before. As if that was something Alden might actually be thinking of trying. "I guess I'll figure out what, if anything, I want to do on my own." The whole idea of taking a swing at that particular hornet nest left him feeling exhausted. Maybe the warthog had been right months ago, and not everything was his problem to solve. He could always just tell Manon's boater that she was manipulating them with her skill and let them save themselves. They were adults. They weren't stupid. They knew how to ask a sway or a mind healer for help, too, didn't they? He looked back at his high-priority category. Official messages from his new home country went there, too. Not because Alden had to keep them there, though. The system would let him dump them just like they were from Total Randos. But they'd send half a dozen welcome to the island text and voice messages that basically all started with different versions of, "Do not dump US in the pile with the Total Randos." "I am such a good citizen," he thought as he read through one of his welcome packets. It was actually all important information. There was an entire America to Isidore legal guide to help him get used to differences in the laws. He had to give it permission to show him pop-ups if he was about to do something forbidden, but it didn't seem like it would be too much of a problem. Isidore was less restrictive in some ways and more in others, but it was mostly pretty common sense when you thought about the reasons for it. Speech was free, but you couldn't have a protest or a large assembly in a public space without permits. Because those spaces were more limited in number here, and a small but significant percentage of the population were dangerous and difficult to handle if tempers flared. Power use was as legal as it could reasonably be in most places. Basically, if you weren't hurting or inconveniencing people or destroying things, you could do it. There was a sliding scale of tolerance for mishaps. The more powerful you were, the less leeway you had in F-City. And there were a couple of districts where even a whiff of potentially offensive spell or skill use would land you in jail for a decade or more. Assuming a summons didn't bust you out before you'd served your time. Those were the family-friendly areas, big residential zones that also held the elementary and middle schools for the island barn kids. Those were supposed to be totally safe spaces, and when Alden looked it up out of curiosity, he saw that those neighborhoods were some of the most expensive to live in on the whole island. Gambling was legal. There was a long list of genetic modifications that were, too. Designer babies were still controversial and illegal in much of the world, but here on Isidore they were so common that they might outnumber purely organic births in the next couple of decades. Most of the adults here were already modified from the human norm. So there wasn't much popular support for the argument that creating smarter, stronger children through science was unethical. Alcohol was illegal. Very illegal. Nobody wanted drunk people knocking the tops off skyscrapers. The list of drugs that were illegal was extremely long, too. Unsurprisingly, the bulk of names on it were unrecognizable Artonan words. Alden's experience must not have been unique. Wizards related like doling out pills, shots, and potions, and the island was engaged in a constant struggle to make people hand the things over when they returned home. Voluntarily doing so was your duty. Also, they would reimburse you. Please, don't feed other people whatever the Artonans have been feeding you while you've been away. Alden opened the top drawer of his nightstand and glanced at the contents. He still had his chaos-damaged Ryabi single-quote model, his lucky wizard's foot encased in putty, and one piece of sensory-sharing gum. He'd honestly just forgotten the gum was sitting in one of the lab coat's inner pockets for ages. Of course he hadn't even considered eating a party drug of unknown quality while he was on Munthagund. He wondered if the chaos had damaged them or if they'd been bad for humans to start with, because Roro had thrown them all away except for the one piece. Gelnors. Of course. His eyes fell on the putty, and he added Stuart's single-quote H to his priority contacts list, too. He had told the primary son to call for internet guidance after all. He had a single, uncomfortably warm letter from Aliavora herself welcoming him to Isidore, telling him she was ever so happy to know he had survived his dreadful ordeal, and letting him know that she would be delighted to make his acquaintance sometime now that they were neighbors. It was inoffensive. But too friendly. And how did she already know he was here now, anyway? He wanted to say nothing. But he decided that completely ignoring the offer of advice and friendship from someone who'd given you $5 million was probably more noteworthy than responding to it. And he was trying to be unnoteworthy. What's the most boring thing I could write back? He asked himself. He went with a short, professional email that basically said, "Thank you. I'll let you know if I need help. But for now, I'm just enjoying a quiet life in Intake." Feeling organized, more informed, and successful, Alden checked the time. And he groaned when he realized he'd only been working for a little over an hour. What was he supposed to do with himself at 4 o'clock in the morning? In the end, he got out of bed and went to play with the pinball machine. He had barely touched one until this week, but he'd completely crushed his aunt in it before she headed back home. Along with 14 of the 15 people on the high scores board. He now had abnormally fast hands in addition to the slightly enhanced visual processing. Pinball was his game. Feels pretty great. Enjoying the small stat enhancements he'd received, at least, came with no additional pain. He'd need to ask her why that was if they met again. He thought the most likely explanation was that the pain was there, but the stats were a passively engaged part of the affixation, rather than something that had to be actively used. So there was no change in output or increase in suffering for him to detect. Or maybe it was something weirder, like how Gorgon's people had destroyed authority to create an effect. Maybe it had been turned into something like an enchantment that coated Alden's being. Maybe it was just gone, and Alden had faster fingers in its place. I don't think that last one's right. He chased down the high scorer while he considered a final possible addition to his high-priority list. It was a strange one. He thought it was maybe even a little crazy. But he wanted to. So, he took the ori out from around his neck and switched it to a spot high up on his left arm. It still had its obliging habit of sticking a little bit where he wanted it to, so it stayed in place well enough. And it was fully covered by the sleeve of the t-shirt he was wearing. He preferred it around his neck and wrists, but it had a tendency to peek out of collars that weren't high enough and sleeves that weren't long enough. He either needed to start wearing turtlenecks on the regular like some kind of wizard fanboy or come up with another comfortable way to conceal it. This would do for now. Call Whirly Roden. Video or audio is fine. Line of asterisks. The call connected. Joe had picked audio. The professor had a preference for no video. Alden had made note of it previously. He wondered if it was because Joe was used to talking to people from locations where he had sketchy stuff going on. There was a long silence before either of them spoke. Finally, Joe broke it. "Do you know what time it is here?" "I don't," said Alden, sending one of the silver balls shooting toward a ramp. "I assumed you wouldn't answer if you didn't want to." "Hello from Earth. Your Artonin is quite good now. I had a lot of time to practice." Another long pause. "What did you call for?" "How do I send space mail to the Quaternary?" "Because I asked the system, and it was unhelpful." "Space mail? To the Quaternary?" "Yes. However it is you guys communicate to your ships when you can't use a contract. Is it just radio? Magic radio? Interstellar pigeons? I would be willing to bet what little funding I have left on you being the first person in history to combine the Artonin word for interstellar with the word pigeons. So that is how it happens. I knew it. It may shock you to know that I do not have permission to send messages to the Quaternary through pigeons or any other means. So I'm afraid I can't help you with that. Alden considered it. That wasn't surprising really. She probably had a super limited list of people who were allowed to bother her in the first place, and it no doubt got cut even shorter when she was somewhere so difficult to reach. Okay. That makes sense. I'll figure something else out. Why do you want to get a message to her? Joe said slowly. I don't. I just want to talk to Kibby. Kivby. They are together. I had heard that the two of you were rescued together. But I very much doubt the Quaternary is keeping a small child with her while she works in a corruption field. I'm pretty sure that's exactly what she's doing, said Alden. Because I asked her if Kibby could stay with her ground team. And she promised me. And she seems like the kind of person who does what she says she will. When Joe didn't answer, he added, she also said I could contact her. But we never actually discussed the details of how I would do that. Because they'd both thought it was just polite words for a dead boy. Anyway, if you hear from Kibby before I manage to get in touch with her on my own, please ask how I can send messages. Should I expect to hear from her? He asked in a surprised tone. I'd give it a 50-50 chance. Kibby really wanted to talk to you. But Knight Alice Art H wants to bury you. So, I think it depends on which one of them wins the Battle of Wills. Joe's tattooed face suddenly appeared in front of Alden's eyes. He was so startled he missed the ball. My high score. What do you mean Knight Alice Art H wants to bury you? The professor said, looking alarmed. What did I do to offend her? She seems to be under the impression that you're one of those bad wizards who takes advantage of innocent young avowed. I don't know why she'd think that. Joe looked like a man who'd just seen the executioner stalking towards him. said Alden. I'm teasing. At least a little. I told her I knew the mission to Monthagund was dangerous. And that I didn't feel like you treated me unfairly. You did. He sounded startled. I did. Why are you hesitating? It's just that I told her that while we thought I was dying, and I was sitting there with your contract tattoo on my chest being forced to talk about berry picking when we both knew it was lies. And even though I was clear on the fact that I don't blame you for anything, I think it probably didn't go very far with her. I see. He closed his eyes. How many things do you think can go wrong in one man's life over the course of just a couple of years? Don't know, said Alden, starting up another game. It's all been rehab single quotes and rainbows for me lately. Joe looked at him. In the image provided by the system, he didn't have on his smart monocle. He didn't seem quite right without it. I didn't know you'd been injured that badly, he said. Well, naturally I assumed you were dead after the first few weeks. And then I heard you'd been rescued along with Kev B, shortly after the lab exploded. I haven't had more information than that. It was demons, Alden said promptly. That was what destroyed the lab. We saw a big one, so we ran away. It must have gotten into some of your sciencey stuff and... boom. You know everyone thinks I blew it up, Joe said in a dry tone. Which is really quite a serious matter, since it looks like I arranged it all ages ago in order to murder the team working for the new owners when they took residence. I will swear on my life before the Grand Senate that it was a demon, Joe, Alden said. That's noble of you. A big demon. Oh, she's not that big. I didn't know demons could be female, but sure. If you say so. Joe sighed. I didn't expect you to call. Alden stared at the blinking lights on the machine. I don't think you made a bad gamble. If just a few things had gone a little bit differently, we could have gotten them all out. I don't really know how Ortonans weigh it. One avowed versus however many regular people. But I think you'd have been stupid not to ask me to go. The corruption event could have broken the system a month later than it did. Or a day. Or a minute. I was that close to teleporting back to the university with Kibby and her sister. Sometimes everything just goes wrong. Indeed, Joe said quietly. He cleared his throat. I take it you're well, then. Since you seem to be moving around and making lots of strange noises. It's a pinball machine. I have no clue what that is. Human magic. I'm fine now. I just almost blew my affixation. Joe shuddered. Funny, thought Alden. I might not have had any idea why he was doing that if I was normal. Night Alice Art single quote H took care of me for a while, and then I guess Artona I must have patched me up. You guess? Well, it's not like I can feel much of a difference, he lied. But I'm still here, aren't I? That would be a good indicator that you've been patched up. On a less serious note, said Alden, your lab coat was the freaking best. It took demon grasshopper strikes like it was designed for it. Why didn't you put that feature in the advertisement? As someone once told me, no rabbit wants a coat designed for work in a bomb lab. I doubt a coat designed for a chaos research lab would sound more appealing. I'm probably going to buy another one. When I'm off leave in a few months. For sentimental reasons. Please do. As one of the designers, I get a small commission. I could really use the funds right now. Alden grinned. Then his smile dropped as he remembered something. I was supposed to give you a message. From then on. She helped me so much when everything first went wrong. We probably wouldn't even have survived without her advice. Joe went still. I wish I could remember the words for you, Alden said. And for her. But it was in Ortonan. The system was already down, and I wasn't in the best frame of mind. I couldn't hold the syllables in my head, and I can't remember the sound of them now no matter how hard I try. Ah well, Joe said in a rough voice. That is understandable. Whatever she said sounded very caring, Alden offered. She called you Ro. And she was smiling. She was a very caring person. Thank you, Alden. Passing on the sentiment was enough. He hung up suddenly. Alden thought about it for just a second longer and then added him to the priority contacts. He glanced down the short list of names. Stuart would know how to call his aunt. It was a little more awkward there. After some reflection, Alden felt uncomfortable about the fact that he'd gone to visit the primary's son because she had suggested that he should, and even offered a bribe. It wasn't the only reason. He could have gotten the reward just by dealing with anyone in the house. But still, Stuart had been very different and much lonelier than he'd ever expected. He'd gone out of his way to mourn Alden's death even though they'd only spoken a few words to each other. And he had even helped him leave the house without agreeing to the family privacy contract, after confessing that he'd had hallucinations as a child. That seemed like exactly the sort of damaging and deeply personal information such a contract should cover. Alden didn't think the Artonan boy was a pushover who would say yes to any request he made. He couldn't be, or some of those snakes at Leafsong would have eaten him alive by now. But he was still disinclined to make a request of any kind until their new acquaintanceship felt more balanced. "Well, I'll just balance it then." Stuart had said he wanted to learn about human culture. Since Alden was an insomniac now, he would spend part of his sleepless hours finding interesting human things and sharing them. Wholesome interesting things. Ones that wouldn't make Stuart think Earth was a horrible place that needed to be destroyed. Because he seemed to be aiming for the kind of position that might give him some say in matters like that. When Jeremy called to say good morning half an hour later, Alden was browsing the internet through his system interface and drinking a coconut milk latte. It turned out he could figure out how to work a coffee machine if he just had his aunt around to help him. If you were going to share human internet stuff with a smart, nice, but socially awkward Artonan guy who might one day be powerful enough to smite our species, what would you choose? Jeremy paused in the act of stuffing a textbook into his backpack. You know, our conversation topics have expanded in some strange directions since you became an avowed. Right? Videos of marching bands, said Jeremy. They are cool. You can't smite a planet that has so many kick-ass marching bands on it. Oh, that's right. Your sister's a band geek. Good job. I'll add it to the list. Between hang gliders and pandas. Chapter 67. Alden sent his list of links off to Stuart. And after some contemplation, he decided if he was going to try sharing human culture with somebody, he should probably start engaging with it again himself. Time to be brave. How hard can it really be to mingle? He stood in front of the fridge, staring at the community activities calendar for the day. He had a more detailed version pulled up on his interface, too. They went all in on the programming here at Intake. Virtually every minute from 6 o'clock in the morning until midnight curfew had something on the schedule. There were tours, classes, board games, athletic events, guest lectures, non-denominational religious services, a scavenger hunt, a mocktail party, and even volunteer opportunities. Alden wanted to pick up litter along the bike path. It sounded like a peaceful job almost nobody else would choose to do. Since that defeated his whole purpose for the day, he selected an educational group tour called Government Buildings and Procedures. It's not the most stimulating option, he admitted to himself. But it's got things going for it. It was one of the for credit opportunities, so there would be people. But there were other classes and tours happening this morning that sounded more fun, so there probably wouldn't be a ton of them. And, more importantly, it didn't seem like an activity where everyone would be showing off their powers. Just by walking through the dorm halls over the past couple of days, Alden had realized that power displays were a huge part of introducing yourself to the other teens in Intake. What's your name? Where are you from? What can you do? He was hoping to get to know other new avowed in a setting where he could just say what his skill was without it being appropriate for them to ask him to do tricks with it. I'd like to at least have some normal conversation before I have to brush everyone off or get into the whole I can't use it right now thing. He headed out, stopping by the counselor's desk to show near his face and prove he was engaging with people. She hadn't told him to do that. Nobody had. But he was aware that there was a certain amount of concerned watching going on in this place. Not just of him, but of several people in unusual situations. None of his new neighbors had caught on to any anomalies with Alden's presence, as far as he knew, but he'd heard them talking about others. There was a right who'd registered and regretted it, and he kept trying to escape from Nzidora by stealing boats. If he didn't knock it off, they were going to have to take him out of intake and put him in more restrictive housing. And there was a morph brute who had come to the dorms after spending weeks at the island ceiling hospital. Her own brothers had set her bed on fire while she slept when they found out she was an avowed. It had made global news. I bet she hates it that everyone knows it about her. He stuffed his hands into the pocket of his hoodie as he crossed the drive that separated his apartment tower from the one that was dedicated to brutes. The tour group was supposed to meet there in the lobby. Most people get to keep their tragedies private. But when you have one that hits a certain level of gruesomeness, suddenly the rest of the world feels like they have the right to stare at it and comment on it. He entered the lobby and blinked in surprise at the decorations. 10-foot-tall bronze statues representing different brute types dominated the space. They stood on raised circular platforms, and there were cushioned benches around each of them. One statue was of a shirtless man holding up a globe like the Greek god Atlas. And there was a woman mid-run, her hair streaming behind her. Alden was pretty sure the man with his mouth open and his arms spread was supposed to represent the vocal subtype. We don't get cool statues in our tower lobby. Unfair. Probably it was because they couldn't rep all the class subtypes without turning the lobby into a thicket of bronze, but they could have done a mural or something. Why do they get statues? Greater than someone said behind him. We don't have statues in our building. Greater than. Almost a third of all avowed are brutes. It's easier to make lots of people happy by catering to them. Or maybe they just get more donations from former residents of this building. Greater than. Alden glanced over his shoulder to see two guys nearby. They were staring up at the statue for Adile brutes. His interface informed him that they were speaking Spanish and Urdu. Are you here for the tour, too? He asked. Of course they were. It was the thing starting in the lobby of this building in a few minutes. But you had to begin a conversation somewhere. Yes, greater than said one of the guys. He poked around at the with a hand, and a moment later, a custom name tag appeared beside him with his personal details. He was 17. From Pakistan. He was a C-rank Meister of Staves. His friend popped a name tag up for himself, too. He was 16. From Costa Rica. He was a C-rank Meister of Torches. He enjoyed fishing. And he was looking for a girlfriend. Torches. Thought Alden, pondering the tag. Did you fight with the torches? Or illuminate things with them? Did it depend on how the Meister built their talents? Oh, wait. It's probably not old-fashioned torches. Maybe it's more like welding torches? Magic welding actually sounded kind of cool. He tossed up the name tag he'd made for himself. He'd kept it simpler than they had. Alden -16, rabbit. Rabbit. Greater than shouted the maybe a welder guy. Do you know her? Greater than. Who? The most beautiful girl in the world is on the rabbit floors. She's an S-rank. She, greater than. Natalie Quire, said Alden. I've met her. Mistake. The other boy's interest level in Natalie wasn't quite in stalker territory by Alden's estimation, but it was dangerously close to it. The guy missed two polite attempts to change the conversation topic and one much less polite one. Fortunately, his roommate wasn't as dense. He started talking about the upcoming tour loudly, and things got more normal. Both of the Meisters had arrived over 2 months ago. They were a few weeks away from overstaying their welcome and getting kicked out of the intake dorms. Their counselors had told them it was time for them to start participating in some of the foot credit activities, like this one, or else they'd be forced to sit through a month of much less fun orientation classes with the slackers when they started school. So that's how it works. Alden had wondered what the punishment for being a total non-participant during your intake period might be. Both of the boys were happy to have been chosen as avowed. And they were pretty relaxed about it. They were interested in the fact that they now had powers, of course. But it was in a more casual way than Alden had expected. The Meister of Staves was enjoying a combat class with a few older avowed who had the same subtype. He thought it was a good hobby and an impressive art. The Torchmeister liked his stat enhancements. Neither of them were thinking of their abilities as something that would be the main focus of their futures. Maybe they'd level a little, maybe they'd get some cool spell impressions, maybe a job here or there. They weren't stressed about it. For them, the big perk of being an avowed was getting to live here on Anzidora. As far as they were concerned, they were already on top just by reaching the island. Whether they ever got summoned or not was pretty irrelevant to them, except for the obvious monetary benefits. But, you could get summoned to fight or do something dangerous, right? Alden asked, addressing the question mostly to the stave user. The torches were for magic wielding, so the other boy was more likely to be summoned for work, not combat. The two Meisters exchanged glances. It could happen? But C ranks with combat classes don't get summoned much. And when we do, it's usually more for appearances than dangerous fighting according to the other Meisters. Getting a deadly job from the aliens is like being struck by lightning, isn't it? You can't walk through life worrying about it. Greater than. Exactly, greater than his friend agreed. Anyway, if you don't want to leave Earth, you just don't train your powers too much, right? High ranks are one thing maybe, but low ranks with low levels are completely different. Greater than. We just get to live here. Greater than. And get hot avowed girlfriends. Greater than. I've been looking at the boarding facilities for the schools, and they're almost as nice as intake. Greater than. Okay. So that's how it was. Probably Alden was the one who was being unrealistic for immediately wondering what they were going to do if they ever got lethal assignments from the Triplanets. Instead of asking them about their favorite things to do on the island and what school they were planning to attend. They loved Anzidora. They were happy to be here. It is a very high standard of living. Alden had known that, but he hadn't really thought about what it meant for people other than himself. Sure. You were trapped. Especially if you didn't have the highly marketable talents that would get you a superhuman job in another country. But despite Bo constantly joking that Alden would starve to death because of the price of things on the island, even poverty on Anzidora was pretty cushy. Basic healthcare was free and high quality. Education was free, high quality, and mandatory, in one form or another, until age 21. There was no such thing as homelessness. Once you were out of school, they would give you a very small but undeniably clean and comfortable apartment to live in if you couldn't afford one on your own. You even had internet access through your interface if you wanted free entertainment. Although Alden had decided just this morning that he hated browsing that way. It felt really intrusive. I need to buy a laptop, he thought as the tour group finally set out. There were about 30 of them. Most people had come because they needed the credits, but a few had chosen this tour because they were super enthusiastic about the fact that they had voting rights now. You were a legal voter on Anzidora the second your avowed feet touched the ground, and they actually wanted to find out how the government worked. Their guide spoke mostly Mandarin, and in the way that a lot of native-born Anisidorans did, he sprinkled in tons of loan words from other languages. They took a train through F-City, stopping at the Capitol building. It was an unusual, trapezoid-shaped structure made of glass and black stone that reminded Alden of the hot lab on a Leafsong campus. This was where the High Council did their thing. The group toured the council chambers, and they even got to meet a few of the class representatives who were in their offices. The current rabbit councilor was in. The rabbit rep never had much power on the council unless they became president, but maybe because of that, she was more willing to talk to the tour. She was a short woman with silver corkscrew curls, and she did a brief double-take when she saw Alden's name tag. She didn't react at all to the name tag of the one other rabbit who'd come today. Alden assumed it meant she knew who he was through some kind of gossip. It was a little concerning. But she didn't say anything about it when she shook his hand, so he decided he liked her fine. The tour was over after 4.5 hours, and Alden, feeling highly successful about talking to other people without coming across as someone who'd been living on a moon for way too long, gave himself permission to break off from the group. They were all going to see a movie together. He picked up an order of stir-fry from a restaurant and went back to the dorm. He wanted to read his Orient book and practice his logograms. And he needed to think. Only a couple of people on the tour planned to seriously pursue leveling their avowed talents. A lot of the others said they did, but either they didn't mean it or they hadn't actually considered how to go about it. They were almost all going to attend the general high school programs in F-City. Those included some cultural training for life as an avowed, in case you got summoned, but they didn't cover power development at all. Well, there weren't any high ranks on the tour. Alden was sitting on the kitchen stool, watching the logograms shift while the system translated the first spell in his book for him. It's not like they could get into a serious hero track course. He'd been the only P in the group. Everyone else had been C or lower. But doing a hero prep program at one of the apex high schools was far from the only option for developing your avowed talents. Even for low ranks, there were leveling track programs of other kinds that split your education between academics and more class-focused learning. If you wanted that. They were considered more time and labor-intensive, but I expected more people to want that. Who just gains the ability to do magic and then doesn't do much with it. Maybe he was thinking about it wrong, though. Most people didn't spend all their time leveling up in normal life. It wasn't like Alden had been doing aerobics to level up his body before he'd been selected. Or seriously striving to expand his mind. He'd been taking advanced classes in high school and lots of consulate extras. But if he was being honest with himself, he'd always just liked keeping busy with school. So that shouldn't count. It was probably more uncommon to run at your goals full tilt and laser-focused than it was to kind of stroll in their general direction. But he'd thought he would encounter a lot more ambition than he had so far. More than in regular high school. I guess I subconsciously stuck too many avowed in the insanely dedicated category because my real-life experience was all with Hannah. And she was a workaholic by any measure. Maybe the most useful thing he learned on the tour was what normal here on Anzidora actually looked like. He called Bo to leave his daily voicemail. I've been thinking that living on a demon moon made me confused about who I am and what I want to do now, he said in a conversational tone. Upon reflection, that's not accurate. What it made me unsure about his long-term career choices. He took a sip from a bottle of blackberry soda. The vending machines in the dorm were free and they had drinks from all over the place. Trying them all was a mini goal. Honestly, he said, being a hero sounds so damn horrifying right now. If someone walked into this kitchen and said, Alden Thorne, run with an injured child on your back for days until you were bloody and broken, I think I'd have to ask if the kid was Kibby or not. He split open another soy sauce packet and poured it over what was left of his rice. I'm not sure it's in me to do something like that again. To deliberately put myself in a situation where I know I might have to. For her, 1,000 times. But maybe not for someone I don't know. He took a bite and swallowed. I'm really so disappointed in myself. For not being the person I imagined I was. Was I naive before? Or am I a coward now for not wanting to go through something that terrible again? I don't know. But I do know who I am at this moment. Better than I thought. And I know what I want to do next. He paused. Come out of hiding if you want to find out what it is, Bo. Otherwise you can just suffer from your own curiosity. Talk to you tomorrow. He ate the last few bites of his lunch and finished his reading. The first spell in the Orient book was complicated. This wasn't a wizard kindergarten textbook for sure. He had no way of knowing if it was actually advanced, but it was definitely more advanced than he'd been expecting. She has a lot of faith in my fingers and my authority control, doesn't she? He thought as he studied the method. When he mastered it, the spell would create a small crushing shape around objects at close range. About the size of an apple. And the things inside it would get very crushed, since it said it could turn even a stubborn stone into powder. Neat. He tucked the book back in his magic bag and locked it, wincing again at the bite of the chip against his sore authority. He'd been wondering how secure it really was in there. As far as he knew there wasn't a population of dorm thieves. But on the off chance that there were, it was going to be hard, bordering on impossible, for Alden to get his hands on another readout book of this quality if anyone stole it to sell to wizard paraphernalia collectors. "All right, system," he said, shoving his takeout garbage into the trash. "What would it cost to store my magic messenger bag in one of your warehouses?" It immediately gave him a list of options, along with prices that frankly hurt. The system warehouses held the wardrobe items and whatever things other classes could purchase before they were sent out to their new owners. There was tons of stuff for rights from what Alden understood. But it didn't do post-purchase storage for free. And it cost even more to store things that were totally personal and not class-related. Like a bag of books. Over the course of a year, if he had the bag stored and teleported to him on a daily basis, it was going to cost like 200 grand. But nobody was going to rob the system of its Artonin-made goodies unless they wanted the true planets to take an aggressive interest in them. So it was undeniably safe. And convenient. Maybe the bag can't be stolen at all because of the lock. Maybe it knocks thieves out or attacks them. How do I even figure that out? "Hey, I know you know how my magic bag works," he said to the system hopefully. "And I respect the fact that you don't usually answer random questions. But since it was a gift from another system, maybe you'll tell me? Do I even need you for storage?" It didn't answer. "Fine. Be that way." He let the system disappear the bag and the books to one of its overpriced hideaways. Then he left the apartment and headed for the elevators. Halfway down the hall, he passed by a dark-skinned girl with long braids. She was sliding flyers under doors. "Stop. Greater than," she said, whipping around to hand him a flyer. "You need us. Greater than. The system translated the flyer for him. It turned out the rabbit girls in room 802 had complementary skills, and they had used them to set up their own apartment salon. Like Natalie, a lot of people who'd taken the class were business-minded. They were planning on their skills being a big part of their future careers, either here or for the Artonins. Maybe that was why I was a little surprised by the others on the tour. "Your hair, greater than," said the girl, staring at Alden. "I can help." Greater than. Alden smiled. "It's that bad, huh? Asymmetrical is a fine look. But that's too hacked up." Greater than. He knew it was. Metus's party haircut had required wires and gel to look good in the first place. And then it had grown out for months. It was significantly longer in some places than in others. And on top of that, he was growing a ton of new hair thanks to Roro. "You look like something bad happened to you, greater than," she concluded. "I'll fix you for free, and you can decide to pay me if you like it." Greater than. He'd been planning to take care of it eventually. He hadn't even been here a week yet. "I'll probably take you up on that." She looked satisfied. He went downstairs to the counselor's desk. Nia was there with her feet propped up, watching television on an Artonin-made tablet. Like the kind from the lab. Alden hadn't actually seen anyone else using one on Earth before. "Hey," she said. She spied the flyer in his hand, then glanced up at his hair. "Good choice." "Wow. I must be hideous." She snorted. "Of course not. You just look like you ran afoul of some cursed scissors." "What's up?" "Goals," he said. "You asked about them. I have some." She sat up straighter. "Do you want to duck into the counselor's office for a private chat, or?" "No. It's not private. We can schedule something more in-depth for later. I just realized I do have some things I'm already sure about, and you said you usually kept track of people's goals. So I wanted to tell you. I'm interested. And I'm listening. I want to spend the next 2 months living here in Intake. I want to get used to life on the island and get to know people. I want to focus on settling in and prepare for what I'm going to do when I leave." Nia set aside her tablet. "I think that's probably a really wise choice for you." It might have been. But it was also a necessity since he couldn't really use his powers right now. After that, he said, "I want to go to school." "You have to go to school," she pointed out. "In some form. We've got lots of options. And Zedora is all about keeping the young out in school and out of trouble. and using your time and intake to go through the application process is the norm. What kind of education do you want to pursue? I don't care which school it is, or what the program is, as long as they can help me train my body and my mentality to be, let's say, stress-resistant, or even disaster-resistant. It rang true as he said it. It wasn't a big, bright life goal, like he'd had before, but it was something he actually wanted right now. And I need talent development. I want them to make me practice the hell out of my skill. I want to get really great at using it. I suspect it has creative applications, but it's going to take a ton of effort to figure them all out. I could use some help. Nia lifted an eyebrow, but when she spoke it was in the same quick, businesslike tone she usually had. Okay. That's a different take from most of our kids. Especially rabbits. But it's probably all doable. She paused before adding, I don't actually know what your skill is. You don't have to share your full profile, but to offer the best guidance, it would help to know what kind of power set you have. Alden went to choose persona and clicked the share button under his false profile. Nia blinked rapidly as she read through it. Let me take your luggage. She glanced up at him. I see. That's the one that vanished from the B-rank list early this year. No kid ever showed up on the island with it. When you came in, I wondered if it was you. It vanished. Alden was startled, though he probably shouldn't have been. Joe had called it limited edition. He hadn't thought to read through the rabbit skill list since he got back home. You know it happens. Skills get cycled out. Either the system itself decides they are not working well for humans, the committees decide they don't like them, or they were experiments to start with and once someone claims them, the system is supposed to take a wait-and-see approach before releasing them more widely. She shrugged. Some of them are just one-offs to start with. They are designed for something really esoteric or special. Sometimes the True Planets is interested in having something but not having too much of it. There was someone who got S-rank bridge right around the same time you must have gotten this one. You know how old I am, and I've never seen that subclass float by. Although in that case, it was a brand new creation, and your skill has been on the rabbit list for as long as I've been reading it. It's an object preservation skill. I see that. I also see that you're a bit of a badass. I'm really not. No. I'm looking at this, and I see 3 levels gained in 6 months under presumably shit conditions. Some slightly weird balancing going on between your foundation points and your levels. I guess you had strange options because you leveled without a system around. Among so many other things, thought Alden. You also really like dexterity, she noted. That's quirky. Quirky? She smiled. I don't mean that as an insult. Quirky is good. I see way too many teens coming in with ideal builds they found somewhere. And they don't even know what they are building themselves for. You should pick at least some of your talents because you think they'll give you joy. Even if you do want to be disaster resistant. You have to remember that you're living a whole life here, inside your own skin, not designing an unbeatable video game character. Noted. Actually, extra noted. That seemed like advice he should make an effort to keep in mind. Now that Alden knew what skills cost, there was additional pressure not to mess up with his choices. It seemed like it would be easy to reach for practical-sounding powers he hated rather than stuff he actually liked. Flickerer was a fun choice for an F-rank skill, she mentioned. I've only met a couple of other people with it. It gets overlooked, but temporarily breaking things is unexpectedly useful. Even if it only works on minor enchantments. Alden brightened. I thought it would be good for that, too. He expected the bearer of all burdens to do a much more thorough job than a skill like Flickerer. It ought to lift any enchantment the skill was strong enough to support, not just minor ones. But it was nice to have confirmation that people found a similar skill useful. Do you know if your skill preserves living things? It does. No damage. 0. How long? It depends on the thing. People? Alden stopped himself from saying days. A few hours. I have to carry them though, so small people are better. Nia smiled. All right. Got it. You want to get your bearings for around 2 months and get your applications done during that time, and then you want to head off to a school where they make you get creative and use the hell out of that power. Alden nodded. It sounds like you do indeed have goals. I will think about these things, call some people, and come up with ideas for you to consider. Thanks. He turned to go. Before he had taken 2 steps, the rabbit counselor said, "You could have just specified that you wanted to go to a high school with a hero training course, but you didn't. Is that because that option is off the table for you?" "No," Alden said, staring at his blurred reflection in the elevator doors. "If the hero prep schools in Apex are the best places to help me level up my skill and gain survival know-how, it's fine." "So you did know those were the places most likely to match your goals then?" "I thought they might be." "All right. I asked because the culture in those is pretty unique. They're hard on B ranks. And on oddballs greater than. And I don't mean the coursework, though that's incredibly tough, too." Alden glanced back at her. She was resting her chin on a hand. "I don't have to burst this particular bubble very often because rabbits tend not to be big fans. But superheroes are. How to put it? Let's say half of them are focused on the hero part. And half of them are focused on the super part. The ones in the first group are very nice people. The ones in the second are some of the most obnoxious on Earth. Personally, I find both types difficult to take in large doses." He considered it. "You think half are in it for the glory? The siren song of celebrity doesn't skip over Avowed. If anything, it's the opposite. And frankly the whole superhero concept is built on an unwholesome mix of necessity, thanks to the existence of superhuman criminals, and pandering. Every major city is to have its pretty little mascot team because people love watching them. I understand that." She nodded. "Then let me tread on your dreams just a little more. Even the good ones have their flaws. It's usually a particular kind of personality that goes to superhero school, even for the right reasons. If you don't fit the type." "I don't expect people to be perfect," Alden said, surprised she was making such a point of it. "And right now I'm just looking for a place to teach me the stuff I need to know." "Okay. I'm only telling you because the hero programs are the best at the things you just asked me for. The training portion of becoming a hero is hardcore, and it's impossible to deny that the programs are excellent at pumping out more powerful Avowed. So, unless you want to go to art school to become a professional gymnast." "A what?" Alden couldn't hold back a laugh. "Hey, I see these specs for balance and agility, and you want to work on your body and your mentality. Have you ever met gymnasts? Super gymnasts? I'm teasing you because it's really a career for brutes. But you say, stress me out bad, Nia, and I think of those guys." "I said I want to be more stress resistant," he said. "It's the same thing." She gave him a smile. "And lucky for you, you will have plenty of stress if you end up at hero prep school. Because I think you will find many of your classmates, and perhaps even a few of the more unprofessional instructors, will be inhospitable to you." Alden considered it. "Do you even think the really good schools will let me in? The ones in Apex? They'll let you in. I know they don't accept many B ranks. I assume you would want Chelena North's feeder high school?" she said. "Unless you're ready to jump up to college, and I don't recommend that. The college and high school hero courses are well connected anyway, and for that kind of program in particular it's better to stick with about of your own age group. Especially if you're weaker than them. I wouldn't mind going to the other schools. It's just nice that Chelena North classes are mostly in English. Subtitles are fine, but, you know." She nodded. "Hard to deal with. Especially when you've got groups talking over each other. Or when speed or nuance is important. CNH caps annual B rank acceptances at 25% for most programs. But for their hero course they cap it at a generous," she drumrolled her hands on the desk, 5%. "Oh, okay. I'm never getting in. I'm a rabbit. I was wondering if you knew that. But they'll let you in. Like I said, you're secretly a badass. Because of the 3 levels? Those are very impressive, but probably not impressive enough under normal circumstances for a rabbit. The thing about our class is that it's a choice. Everyone knows you wanted it when you got it because it's easy to trade out of. Picking it tells the world you prioritize certain things. None of those things dovetail well with superhero work. Or even superhero school. Right. The timers. And summons frequency. But I do have 8 months off. And vacation days on top of it. And some refusals. Nice break. Please make good use of it, and take care of yourself. After that, your school will just have to suck it up and deal with it. Because someone important gave you a star. The commendation? Alden frowned. That doesn't really have anything to do with school. She arched her brows at him. The commendation for bravery from Numero Quattro doesn't have anything to do with getting into a hero program? Did you just call Night Alice art single quotation Numero Quattro? The system translations for there. I don't know what to call them, extra special champions against chaos, get pretty ridiculous. I just use what I like in the moment. I've seen a few of them from a distance at events. Never met one face to face, though. You can bet I'll use my proper Artonan terminology if I do. She was giving him a very curious look. Oh, he said, after realizing she wanted juicy details. She was nice to me. They all were. I think. All? How did you manage to encounter multiple numeros in one half-year session? I do understand it was a bad session. But I've spent longer on the true planets than just about any human you will ever meet, except for the people who've literally moved there. Seeing one is like sighting an endangered animal. All the other wizards in the room get odd. Alden scanned her face, trying to figure out if she knew why the other wizards got odd. Well, they are really powerful, right? He said finally. So I've heard. I have suspicions about them, but that's all. I think wizards are socially, hell, maybe even magically, obligated to keep silent about them outside their own class. Even teenagers will clam up if you start prying. And the regular Artonans I've asked seem to regard them as a separate, higher class of wizards. But just between you and me, I've always suspected that the Triplanets saved the really good talents for themselves. Why wouldn't they? I don't know why wizards don't all affect something, but I assume it has to do with limiting who gets access to additional power. Whatever oaths the numbered ones have to swear are probably so restrictive that they exclude most of the species. Ah. So she didn't know. Not really. Alden was just guessing, but he suspected the oaths themselves weren't that bad. And it was just the other thing that kept people from signing up for knighthood. Because it was bad enough. He found he felt no need to clarify. Instead he said, I guess I was lucky. I actually met a couple of them even before everything went wrong. It did feel really good to talk casually with someone about Artonan stuff. He hadn't realized he'd be able to. With most people in the dorms, it would be like talking about a study abroad trip you take into a country they knew nothing about. They were at a party, he said. At Leafsong University. It's on Artona 3. Gotta love a Triplanets party. Also. Sweet job. That's literally their second best wizarding university. They rank schools with absurd seriousness, just like they do everything else. The first is on the mother. Leafsong supposedly has a better climate. It is a terrible climate. For them, Nia clarified. I sweat so much, Alden said, leaning over the desk. Like, there was not enough antiperspirant. I kept wondering why the hell it didn't bother them that their human staff were all disgusting and dripping on their stuff. She cackled. It was 90 degrees Fahrenheit. He exclaimed. All the time. The human dorm was air-conditioned, but it reeked of body odor from people's unwashed laundry. She kept laughing. The outfit I had to wear to do lab work was a full-length leather coat. Oh my God, kid, she said, wiping her eyes. Stop, stop. You'll get me started on some of mine. How do you not melt? He demanded. I need you to tell me. You're my rabbit elder. It's basic survival skills. You. She snorted. A couple of guys stepping off the elevator gave the two of them a strange look before they headed down the hall. You have to suck up to a wizard who likes enchanting. Give them all of your clothes, and have them put cooling spells on them. It will save you from pit sweat and rashes. Okay, said Alden. Since we're talking about this, what is with all the drugs? Don't do them. I don't do drugs normally. But you get there, and they're like, here's a pill, human. And here's another pill. And here's a shot in your jugular. And here's a dozen shots to fix what that first shot did to you. They actually have substance abuse problems, she said. Seriously. It's a big issue for the wizard class. But they have to learn all of the magic chemical stuff for school, so none of the ingredients are illegal. And they just really like making and taking potions themselves. And they want to share. Alden cleared his throat and whispered, also, I wanted to report it after reading my legal guide, but I didn't know who to tell. I think maybe I committed a crime by bringing a piece of gum back with me. She blinked. That would depend on what kind of gum it was, she whispered back. Some kind of sensory sharing stuff. They gave it to me at the party. Oh. That kind's actually not illegal. You can keep it. At first I thought it might be useful for combat training or something. No, she said. No? Nope. She was still whispering. I'm sorry. But as you're welcome to Avowed Life Counselor, I have to ask before you make some kind of mistake. You know what that gum is designed for, right? Sharing senses? Yes. She stared at him. He stared back. And, very belatedly, he remembered certain implications that had been made by Joe the first time he'd asked about the gum. So. That was indicated to me. By someone. A girl wanted to eat appetizers with me? I just thought it was one of many possible functions, maybe. But if someone of an appropriate age gave you that, they were hitting on you. Trading that gum is junior wizard flirting. She was keeping her expression professionally blank. I'm just trying to make sure you know, for future reference, that appetizers plus gum is a lot more suggestive than it would be at a human party. Shit. Now I have to go to my apartment and crawl onto the sofa and die. Don't feel embarrassed, she said. It's a totally reasonable point of ignorance. And when you get done dying, please note that there are some educational courses about that kind of thing you can take for credit. Gustavo teaches them with one of our other counselors. They try to keep it light-hearted. I'd rather not. Suit yourself. But if you don't take them here, they just make you take them as part of high school orientation. She paused. Welcome back to Earth. Think of it as our special way of making sure you don't get too comfortable here. Thank you, said Alden. I will never ever forget this conversation. Unfortunately. And you're going to live forever and remember how dumb I am eternally. So. Yeah. I've already forgotten it. Thanks. I don't even know what you're thanking me for. Chapter 68. Alden enjoyed a week of peace and anonymity before he chose to bite the bullet and attend a Meet the New Residents event. The neighbors were getting interested in him. Natalie Quire was worried he'd been left out because an apartment full of new rabbit boys was being filled on the floor below. Her roommates had been hinting that they wanted access to the coffee machine. And the guys in 912 had invited him over to hang out with them tomorrow and watch our rock garden do something, which they promised would be worth it. Frankly, he was so curious about that one that there was no way he was going to miss out. He was sure it was only a matter of time before his story went viral through Intake. Lying sleepless in bed the night before the meet and greet, he had decided it would be better to pick the moment himself, so he could take control of the narrative before it came out as a gossip-generated mutant that was even worse than the real thing. This is for the best. And what can a rock garden even do? He thought as he entered the crowded lecture room where the event was being held. It was decorated with neon-colored paper chains, and there was a table with drinks. It was an optional event and purely social, so pretty much everyone who'd come was in friend-making mode. He grabbed a plastic cup full of pineapple punch and a seat. There was a counselor from the Brute Tower chilling in a corner, but other than standing and letting everyone know that it was time for newcomers to start going up to the lectern at the front of the room, he didn't have much to do. Alden listened to a dozen different people talk about themselves. A D-rank life shaper focused on her hobbies. And a rank adjuster told everyone that he was planning to specialize in fire spells and attend a hero program at Legion Academy starting in a few weeks. There was lots of clapping and cheering. Everyone was thrilled to share the story of how they became an avowed. It started to get really relaxed, and of course people were showing off their new powers. All right, Alden thought, standing up during a slight lull. Get the job done. Don't completely ruin the tone. How hard can it be? He walked up to the lectern with his drink and took in the 100 or so people in the room. Faces around his own age from every corner of the globe looked back at him. The fact that he now lived in a place with people from all over the planet was astounding, and he still hadn't gotten used to it. "Hi," he said, "I'm Alden. I'm a B-rank rabbit. I got selected back in February." A few of them looked confused, probably because that was too far back for him not to be at least a minor criminal. "I actually got summoned for the first time right after I'd finalized my talent selection," several people clapped. A brood shouted encouragements. Alden had known that they would be excited. It was considered cool to already have a summoning under your belt before you even hit the island. He tried not to feel awkward. He tried not to be awkward. "Yeah," he said, taking a sip from his drink. "Thanks. It was a good first job. Lab assistant work. 10 days. At this really swanky wizard school. I made some money. I made friends with a Gryvik." Everyone laughed. "No, I really did. She's great. I called her last night, and she was so excited. She said she'd kill something in my honor." They laughed again. "Well, I guess it's hard to understand if you weren't there." Alden had even toned it down for them. Sophie had actually been in the process of stocking her dinner when she answered his call, which was the most expensive one he'd ever made. Apparently Earth to Sriik was extreme magical long distance. She'd said she would chase her prey more slowly to prolong its death and celebrate his return to life. "Anyway, I got an additional quest while I was there, you rabbits. You need to leave some for the rest of us." Greater than. Alden smiled. "And there was an accident when I teleported to Munthagund. It's in the Artona I system. It has not much on it. I got stuck there for a while. More than half a year. Because the system broke due to a minor chaos incident." People were still grinning, but in an uncomfortable way now. Like they weren't sure if he was being serious or not. Mentioning the demons would be too high drama, right? Alden thought it would be. He was trying to keep the story true-ish but not so detailed or grim that everyone would be desperate to hear more about it. It was hard. The brood intake counselor was giving him a super concerned look in air typing, which made Alden think he might be texting Nia to ask what the new rabbit boy's deal was. "Since the system was broken, I couldn't teleport back home. So I lived in a vault in an abandoned laboratory to protect myself from the corruption. I spent most of my time studying Artonan. I speak it now. Pretty well. And I thought it would be interesting to prove it by finishing my introduction in that language." This was a completely spur-of-the-moment decision. Because everyone else had been finishing by showing off their powers in some way. And Alden would rather be filleted with a spoon. "Good afternoon. It is my honor to stand where instructors of mine have stood. That's a polite thing to say in classrooms. I hope nobody will be bothered if I leave on my shoes. While I was there on Kimner's orbital stone Eckhart, greater than. Alden blinked. He had his translator set to show him what the English speakers in the room were seeing when he talked to make sure it wasn't coming out wrong. He hadn't expected the system to translate the word he'd used for moon so literally. "I gave the gift of my lifetime to observing the trials and discoveries of the good child Claypack with an Artonan friend, and I nurtured the fruit of the ground in a greenhouse." Greater than. What the hell, Earth system? Thought Alden, staring at the translation. Are you playing with me right now? Yes. That was technically what he was saying. But that wasn't what it sounded like in Artonan. It was somehow coming across as both stiff and kooky, but it was really everyday talk. The Artonans could lay both of their feet on the gas of the poetic formula when they wanted to. This was not it. He started deliberately dodging the words he thought would come out the worst, and went on. We were rescued by a team of wizards and about, and I've been passing the days of my life here on Anzidora for a week. My main skill saves things, greater than. That one was probably my bad. There were a lot of synonyms for preservation. It was hard to pick the right one. It holds things unchanging, greater than he clarified. Well, I guess I'm not quite as good as I think, since I can't make the words come out right. It's just a preservation skill. It freezes objects I hold, and it keeps them safe. He took another sip from his drink. I would rather not show it off. I had to use it a lot on Munthegund, and I'm kind of taking it easy on things that remind me of that place. Therapist's orders. It wasn't. But it sounded like something she might have wanted him to do. And what else was he supposed to say? The second best idea he'd come up with was telling them all that he was abstaining from power usage right now because he'd missed his chance to do it during Lent. Got all the hard parts out. Time to prove I am totally normal by finishing with something less serious. I think I might be really good at pinball. My apartment has a machine in it. Feel free to text if you want to come use it sometime. Done. Nobody was clapping like they had for everyone else. Which seemed unfair really. Alden had spoken a foreign language. And revealed work experience. And friendships with multiple species. He felt he deserved at least a small round of applause. Line of asterisks. Alden got lots more attention than he wanted after that. But not so much that it was impossible to deal with. He attended events occasionally and acted as boring as he could when people peppered him with questions. There were a lot of other interesting about in the dorms. For example, S-ranks tended to attract stares just by being around. And one of the brutes who'd come in recently was a famous child actor. Alden hoped his story would fade into the background given a little more time. Being a human around other humans again wasn't as hard as he'd feared it would be. And it definitely wasn't bad. But it made him aware, on a daily basis, of the fact that he was different from though he had been in subtle ways. He was more easily annoyed now, snappish by his own standards even if he didn't think he'd hurt anyone's feelings badly yet. It could just have been his lack of sleep and constant discomfort taking a toll, but he was working on reining it in anyway. He'd always considered himself fairly easygoing, and he'd liked that about himself. He wanted it back. Other changes didn't trouble him as much. They just left him confused. Crowds were different now. The noise bothered him. People bumping into him didn't at all. It was the reverse of his previous feelings, and he didn't understand what psychological processes could have made it happen. He cared a little less what people thought of him. He cared a lot more about his own physical comfort. The last fact amused him to no end once he realized it was an actual phenomenon he was experiencing. Alden was now someone who actively appreciated cozy sweaters in perfect temperatures and pleasant smells. It wasn't like he'd completely ignored those things in the past, but he'd definitely never been a person who could just sit around enjoying the fact that he had on a warm pair of socks. It wasn't even some emotional, grateful to be alive thing as far as he could tell. It was just that the nice socks really felt nicer than they had before. And cinnamon smelled better. And colors looked more striking. He didn't know what to blame for it. Maybe his long stretch of deprivation and discomfort had sensitized him. Maybe Roro's healing sessions had done something to him? Maybe it was because physical pleasure was now always contrasted with metaphysical pain? Whatever it was fun. He could make himself noticeably happier by digging his toes into a plush rug. And so far he hadn't gotten tired of it. He was also more introverted than he'd been previously. He had never been the life of the party, or wanted to be, but he was quiet enough in groups now that people had begun to mistake it for actual shyness. Which was working out surprisingly well for him in this setting. Alden lived in the part of the dorms affectionately called the Warren, surrounded by rabbits. And a lot of rabbits were empathizers. They liked their appeal points, They took extras, and plenty of them hadn't denied the system permission to include the personality alterations. They almost all wanted to be friendly, cute, and social. Being the shy one on Team Rabbit was triggering a lot of outreach and inclusion efforts from people who were unnaturally good at reaching out and including. He got a haircut from the girl downstairs. It was shorter and more even, a definite improvement, but it still looked more tousled than he'd expected. She informed him that since he wasn't going to be getting summoned for a long while, it was magically designed to maximize his features according to average human taste. She could choose between making her clients appealing to humanity or the Artonans. He was supposed to return for a trim every 2 weeks if he wanted to stay perfected. One of the hairstylist's roommates did mock-up and had tried to interest Alden in under-eye concealer, but he'd refused. The hair was enough. He'd just wear his new insomnia chic look with pride. Meanwhile, the guys in 912 kept finding new excuses to invite him over even though the rock garden was in its dormant cycle. The garden was actually a see-through table, full of what appeared to be colorful rocks in a bed of sand. They were in fact alien life forms that were popular decorative elements on the triplanets. Every few days they woke up, sprouted legs, and sort of gently did battle with each other for desirable new positions in their habitat. Lots of rabbits came when it was wake-up day and ate takeout and placed argold bets on which of the rock creatures would come out on top. Having money to blow, even if it was just the standard stipend for most of them, was novel for many kids in the dorms. And rabbits liked money a little extra anyway. It was supposed to be one of their class benefits, after all. Gambling was popular. What Alden had lost betting on a sleepy blue rock, he made back by defeating people at pinball. Except for his new nemesis, a C-rank speedster girl from the Brute Tower who was on a mission to crush Alden on high ranks in intake at their favorite games with her stupidly fast reflexes. She kept beating him. But he was gaining ground. She was very confused about it. Most people didn't have their hands specifically overclocked unless they were something like a Meister who played musical instruments. Alden hadn't told her that his were enhanced. If all of that wasn't enough to keep him busy, the girls across the hall seemed to have adopted him as an honorary roommate. It was a rare honor since Natalie's friends expended a lot of energy keeping people away from their overly appealing, S-rank kitchen goddess. He wasn't sure if they were protecting her or monopolizing her services, but she seemed happy. And they brought breakfast over every morning in exchange for coffee access, so he wasn't going to complain. Even with his new fascination with tastes and smells, he hadn't quite gotten to the point where he started weeping over freshly made beignettes. But he could see it coming when Natalie leveled up a bit more. She was seriously focused on leveling already. She wanted to max out cook of the moment and add on some sub-skills that would help her tailor her meals to be perfectly nutritious for her clients. One day, she was going to be the universe's best personal chef. You know, you're building yourself into someone who will basically always be working for the Artonans, right? Alden asked on the 5th morning after his self-intro speech. He was making everyone's coffee order while one of Natalie's roommates rearranged the furniture in the living area. Taylor environment was as popular as ever among the C-ranks, and Natalie herself scooped porridge into bowls and started adding toppings. I know, Natalie said cheerfully. It's going to be so exciting to see other planets. An F-rank girl named Elijah was leaning on the counter waiting for Alden to finish his first ever attempt at latte art. She glanced between the two of them. I think Alden might disagree with you, Natalie. Greater than. No, it's, Natalie gasped in horror. That was so inconsiderate of me. Oh my God. I didn't even think. The other two roommates were listening curiously. It's really fine, said Alden, watching a barista pour frothed milk through his interface and trying to mimic the motions. Seeing other planets is exciting. I don't have a phobia about leaving Earth again or anything. He didn't think he did anyway. He would definitely feel differently if someone summoned him to Munthegun, but everywhere else would probably be okay. Once he'd had enough time off. You're not scared to go back? Greater than Elijah asked. I would be scared. I've been scared of getting summoned ever since I heard. I didn't think anything bad ever happened to rabbits. Greater than. Alden felt himself freeze. It hadn't occurred to him that his story might have upset people in that way. But of course it had. Especially the rabbits. Some of them were already being summoned occasionally. Even more of them would be before their first few months as an avowed were over. He looked around at the 4 girls. Have none of you been summoned yet? Not even you, Natalie? No. Greater than. Not yet. Greater than. S ranks are more expensive, and people who can afford a cook of the moment for special occasions actually want one with experience, said Natalie. Because I'll get a lot better at it once I master ingredients. But that's really hard, since I don't even know what the ingredients on the true planets are. After I have a few more months of practice here on Earth, I'll turn on a special option called volunteer. It'll get me half-priced job offers from people who wouldn't normally be able to hire an S, so I can start building my social reputation and figuring out how the kitchens work over there. I didn't realize there was so much to it, said Alden. But my skill isn't artsy. It was pretty useful right out of the box, so it makes sense that there would be a difference. I've been summoned once, greater than the girl with Taylor Environment said while she carefully pinched the corners of a throw pillow into sharp points. But all I did was arrange someone's desk. It only took 45 minutes, and I didn't even see Andertonen in person. He or she just called and asked me to get it done before they came into work. Greater than. She looked embarrassed. I couldn't tell if they were male or female. Isn't that awful? Greater than. No, it's normal, said Alden, sliding him Elijah the latte. It didn't look half bad in his opinion. They don't have any sex-specific names, hairstyles, or clothes. I can almost always tell with adults, but with kids I'm completely clueless. They don't care if an alien gets it wrong, though. Most of the time they don't even bother to correct you. Were they nice to you? Greater than Elijah asked. Alden considered the question. Were they nice to you? He tried to remember how he'd felt that first day, what he'd expected and feared versus what he'd actually experienced. Apparently he pondered for a little too long, because all the girls got really quiet. Sorry, he said, I met a lot of Artonans during my main job at the college helping with the entrance exams. Not the one that went wrong. So I was taking a minute to think it all through and give you a real answer. They are just people. Some of them are terrible. Some of them are great. Most are somewhere in between. The difficult thing is... What? Greater than. It's the power dynamic, he said finally. I was freaked out by it for the first few days. You can say no to things. Even things that aren't covered by all the specifics in the human morality rules. From what I've seen, most Artonans aren't lunatics who are going to force you to do some unimportant errand if you make it clear that you have a real problem with it. But it is an alien culture and they're in charge. It was stressful to know that seriously refusing to do something was going to be way harder and more complicated than it would be in most situations on Earth. Did you have to refuse an assignment? Natalie asked, sounding appalled. He looked over at her. She was holding the serving spoon in the air and letting the porridge she'd made drip on the floor. I should clarify that my skill is unusual for a rabbit, he said. It's good for medical emergencies. And carrying things that are on the verge of exploding. Do you mean bombs? Greater than. I think he means bombs. Greater than. Potentially. So I'm more likely to have assignments where refusing is something I would want to do more and be able to do less. Or not at all. Because, you know, emergency stuff. I might just be oversensitive to it. And I did have to refuse one. I had to call a wizard to bail me out when some of the students asked me to do something that was basically impossible. What was it? It's a secret, said Alden. Because they were stupid, and they embarrassed themselves. And they have really important families. Did you get a tattoo? Greater than. No, he said. I'm just not interested in pissing off potential future summoners. He briefly considered telling them he did have a contract tattoo for another reason but decided against it. Rabbits mostly seemed to fall into the camp of avowed who thought they were cool, but some people were weird about them. "Okay," Natalie said 10 minutes later while they were all polishing off their insanely delicious breakfast. "So, the most important question. Alden, they gave you a lot of money, right? Don't just ask him like that. Greater than. We're all rabbits. We can ask. Greater than. That's not how manners work. Greater than. I don't mean I want you to tell me what your pay was," Natalie said quickly. "I mean you got enough to go ahead and do it in October, right? The spree." "That's the shopping thing, isn't it? The shopping thing? Greater than. So understated. Greater than. You have to take it seriously. If you have money, it's your duty as a rabbit to participate. Greater than. And crush the egos of all who look down on us. Greater than. Alden raised his eyebrows at him. "Elijah. I'm serious. I'm an F. My skill fixes chip paint. I know it's not special. I know I'm not a real avowed. But the other classes don't have to laugh in my face when I tell them about it. Greater than. One of the S-rank brute girls called Natalie just a cooking doll. Greater than. The spree is how rabbits get revenge. And stand up for our species. Greater than. I haven't been summoned yet," Natalie said. "But I've been selling meals to lots of people, and I've made enough that I should be able to do it in a few weeks. You could participate, too, right? It's like a horrible rich person conspicuous consumption thing?" Alden said doubtfully. "Yes," said Natalie. "Yes. Greater than. Stylish conspicuous consumption. Greater than. The whole Warren will support the chosen ones. Greater than. How much do I have to spend to do it?" "It's a $5,000 gold minimum to officially be part of the spree," said Natalie. "I'll think about it. It doesn't really sound like me. Buy a car on spree day." Greater than Elijah whispered. "You know you want one." Greater than. "I'm buying a new wardrobe and changing my clothes every hour," said Natalie. "I wanted kitchen equipment, but it's not conspicuous enough. I can't carry around a $2,000 mixer all day without looking like a crazy person." They were all staring at him expectantly. "I guess if I could think of something practical." "I'll think about it," he said noncommittally. Tobe continued, "Thanks for listening.